Rates and unit rates. Let's start off with what a rate is. So you have a vocab word, rate. So last week we talked about ratios, okay? Two things that stay constant together when we had 4 boys to 5 girls. We had groups of 3 cans to groups of 4 cans. So a rate is a ratio. It's one of those things. But it's comparing 2 quantities of different kinds of units. So last week we had boys and girls, but those were people. We're comparing people. Rates don't compare the same thing. They're different kinds of units. I will give you an example in just a moment. And the second word is a unit rate. So now that you know what a rate is, comparing 2 things that are of different kind of units, a unit rate is when the second quantity, so you have 2, comparing 2, the second one, when it's worth 1, that makes it a unit rate. All right, so let's look at some examples of ratio. If my thing will connect, there we go. Ratio is what we did last week. And a ratio is comparing 2 numbers, 15 to 5. For every 15 of something, we have 5 of something else. 15 to 5 is the ratio. And remember, ratios can be written with the colon, the word to, or as a fraction. When we get into rates, we're actually going to write these ratios as fractions. It makes things a lot easier if we write them all as fractions. So we had the 15 to 5. Well, now my rate is labeling what those things are. 15 letters in 5 seconds. So we're comparing letters and seconds. Those are 2 different things. This means somebody's typing speed. How quickly can they type? They can type 15 letters on their keyboard in 5 seconds. So the unit rate says that the second quantity has to equal 1. In this case, we're talking about seconds being the second quantity. So that would have to be 1 second. And in 1 second, this person can type 3 letters on their keyboard. 3 letters in 1 second. The number 1 is what makes it a unit rate. All right. Here's an example of a unit rate. Now, you don't have to draw this picture. You don't even have to write down cost of milk per gallon. What I want you to write down is the actual unit rate, which is the cost of 1 gallon, $2.50 per 1 gallon of milk. So it's a unit rate because it has a rate, which is $2.50, but it's for 1 gallon of milk because it's a 1, it's a unit rate, 1 unit. So just write $2.50 over 1 gallon. Another example would be somebody running. So Sarah can run at 8 minutes per mile. So that unit rate, and again, you only have to write down the fraction part. That unit rate is 8 minutes over 1 mile. There's only 1 mile to run, so that is the unit rate because it is a 1 as the second number. So just write 250 over 1 gallon and write 8 minutes over 1 mile. Also write down this word per. That's not like a kitten. That's a different kind of per. Per equals 1. So when we say cost of milk per gallon, that means 1 gallon. If we say Sarah can run 8 minutes per mile, that's 1 mile. If I say I'm driving 50 miles per hour, that means I'm driving 50 miles in 1 hour. Per means 1. All right, how do you get to a unit rate? To get the unit rate, you divide both the numerator and the denominator until the denominator equals 1. Write that down. And then we'll do a quick example and I'll show you a shortcut. So remember when we were simplifying fractions, we would simplify, and sometimes it wouldn't be the fraction's simplest form, and you could simplify again because you could divide by another number. You would divide and divide until that that denominator, that bottom number equals 1. So we're just going to do a number example real quick. We're not going to worry about our labels of it. Just know that our rate is going to be 49 to 7. 49 whatever to 7 whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is we need to make this into a unit rate. So we want that denominator to end up equaling 1. So what am I going to divide 7 by in order to get the answer of 1? 7 divided by what would give us 1? Yeah, we just divide by 7. The goal of finding the unit rate is to get the denominator as 1. So let's just worry about the denominator. 7 divided by something equals 1. 7 divided by 7. Now, just like simplifying fractions, whatever I did to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I divided this denominator by 7, which means I have to do the same thing to the top. I have to divide that one by 7 as well. What is 49 divided by 7? Those of you know your multiplication tables. Yeah, 49 divided by 7 is 7. So my unit rate is 7 to 1, or 7 over 1. Now remember, this isn't actually a fraction. It's a unit rate. It's comparing two things. If this were fractions, like we did months ago, doesn't 7 over 1 just mean 7 wholes? Right? You can't write 7 wholes because 7 over 1 actually is a rate of 7 something to 1 something. They're comparing two things. So you have to keep the 1 there. It'd be 7 something over 1 something. Good? All right, you do not have to write Samantha picked 45 oranges in 5 minutes. What you're going to do is write out these steps. So most of the problems you're going to see are going to say something like this. Samantha picked 45 oranges in 5 minutes. Write as a unit rate. So now these are your actual steps on how to write a unit rate. Okay? And when you're doing your homework or on a test, you won't have to do it step by step. You'll be able to do it all together in one spot. But for the sake of your notes, you're going to write out each step so that you know the directions when doing this. And the first is write the rate as a fraction. When we did ratios last week, we know that the first number, 45, is going to be our top number, our numerator. So the first thing they're talking about is 45 oranges. That means the first thing that we write down on top is 45 oranges. 5 minutes, the time came second. 5 minutes goes below. You should all be writing step 1, write the rate as a fraction, and then next to it you should have 45 oranges over 5 minutes. These are the exact steps you're going to need to solve unit rates. Step 2. Step 2 is to divide 5 minutes to make it equal to 1. So we need to turn 5, the denominator, into 1. So if I have 45 oranges and I have 5 minutes on the bottom, that 5 minutes needs to be divided by something, again, to equal just 1. Here's the secret. Here's the shortcut. It's not really a secret. Here's the shortcut. Whatever your denominator is, just divide by that number. Whatever number we're trying to get to 1, divide by itself. So we're trying to get this 5 into a 1, so divide by itself. Divide by 5. Whenever you divide something by itself, the answer is always 1. So step 2 is going to be turn that denominator into 1. In this case, it was divide by 5. Which brings us to step 3. Step 3 is to divide the oranges, or the numerator, by the same number. Whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top, which means we're going to take those 45 oranges, and we're going to do exactly what we did to 5, which was divide by 5. Now, the numerator is where you have to do the math, because obviously 5 divided by 5 is 1. That's easy. 45 divided by 5, you have to know your multiplication tables, and you should get 9. Yeah. Cool. And your last step, we've done all the hard part, the math. The last step is just to write the unit rate as a fraction. So now we know what our oranges is, it's 9. We know what our minutes is, it's 1, because that's what we wanted to make 1 minute. Oranges on top, minutes on bottom, 9 oranges for every 1 minute. You can sit up there if you can't see. All right. It's a little bit confusing, but you're going to see it. You're going to see it on Delta Math, and you're going to see it once in a while, some homework and some quizzes, but not too often. And that is a fraction where there's going to be no unit rate. So write down no unit rate and underline it, because I want you to have an example of no unit rate and know exactly where it is and what to do. And then to start off with, I just want you to look up here. You don't have to write anything down just yet, but I want you to look up here. So I told you that to get to 1, you just take the denominator and divide it by itself. Meaning, to make 30 equal 1, we would divide by itself, divide by 30. 30 divided by 30 is 1, right? But if we divide by 30 on the bottom, we have to do the top. $18 divided by 30. You can't do that, can you? I mean, you have to make a decimal, but we can't have decimals. We're dealing with fractions. So that does not work. You say, well, what if I flipped them, Mr. Evans? What if I put 30 on top and 18 below? Okay, so if we divide it by 18, that would equal 1 below, but that means I have to take 30 and do the same thing. Does 18 go into 30 evenly? No. So that doesn't work either, does it? So we can't get 1 unit out of this. So what you're going to do is just simplify. And this is the part I want you to write down. I want you to write down 18 miles to 30 minutes. In other words, in 30 minutes, somebody drove 18 miles, or in 18 miles, it took 30 minutes to drive, however you want to say it. But we can't divide by 30, can't divide by 18. So what you have to do is you have to find the GCF, okay, to simplify it. Now, I already found the GCF for you. Instead of listing out our factors of 18 and listing out our factors of 30, look in the list and find the biggest one. I already did it for you. It's 6, okay? So the GCF is 6, which means we're going to divide by 6. We're simplifying 18 over 30. And 6 is the biggest factor they share, so that's what we're dividing by. So 18 divided by 6 and 30 divided by 6 gives you 3 over 5, or 3 miles in 5 minutes. Now, if you look at 3 miles in 5 minutes fraction, we have the same problem we had with 18 over 30. You can't get it to 1 evenly, can you? If you divide the bottom by 5, that would get you 1 minute. But if you divide the top by 5, you'd have 3 divided by 5. That doesn't come out evenly. So because the ratio is 3 to 5, it cannot be simplified to a whole number rate. A whole number. We can't get a nice even whole number when we divide. You'd get a fraction or a decimal if you divided. So because you can't get a whole number, we're going to write this in one of 2 ways. The first way I would allow you to do on a test or a quiz, and that's just to leave it in simplest form. We simplified 18 over 30. We got 3 miles in 5 minutes. That would be the simplest, smallest form you can get it. Yes, write down the blue part. The second way to write this ratio, the rate to write this rate is, the goal is to get minutes to 1, right? The bottom number has to turn into a 1. So that means the top number can be whatever we want. Not whatever we want, but whatever it comes out to mathematically. It doesn't have to be 1. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that 3/5 and you're going to make it its own fraction. 3/5, and the label goes with the top number label. Whatever's on top doesn't have to equal 1. The bottom has to equal 1. So if I simplify this fraction of 18 miles to 30 minutes, I end up with 3 miles over 5 minutes. But I can just take the numbers 3 over 5, or 3/5, and put that fraction with the top label, which is miles. Once I've done that, I just make the bottom a unit, 1, and then what are we talking about? Minutes, 1 minute. Now, the reason this works is because, I just want you to watch this part, you don't have to write it down. If we divided 5 by 5, that would give us 1. If we divided 3 by 5, 3 by 5 looks like that, but you can also write division in fraction form, can't you? It just means the top number divided by the bottom number. 3 divided by 5. That's what we're doing here, 3 divided by 5. But instead of doing the math, we're just writing it as a fraction. Now, you can't have fraction over a fraction like that. That doesn't work. So you have to take that top fraction and just say 3/5 of, what are we talking about on top? Miles to 1 minute. Okay? You're not going to see too many of these that don't come out to 1 unit, but if you do, you take the simplest form, and that's your fraction. All right, you guys, we're almost done. So I have here 44 points in 4 quarters. Not sure what type of game this would be. Maybe football, but anything that would have 4 quarters in it would work. So what we want to know is the unit rate, or how many points in 1 quarter. So for 200 XP, who's willing to come up to the board and do this and solve 44 points in 4 quarters? Go ahead, Mason. Well, I want to see what you're doing first. But you can do it. You don't have to write step by step like we did in our notebook. You can just write. You can just solve. Start with what? Well, you don't. That number's not up there. 44 and 4 is what's up there. So what do you start with? Erase your 11 over 1. Nope, that's not what you start with. What's the first step? Somebody read the first step out loud. All right, so write your rate as a fraction. There we go. So we have 44 points in 4 quarters. First number on top, second number on the bottom. Step 2 is going to be to make that what? The denominator what? Make the denominator what, Mason? Make it 1. So how would you get 4 turned into a 1? All right, so 4 divided by 4 gets you 1. If you divide the denominator by 1, what are you going to do to the numerator? Yeah, the exact same thing, divided by 4 as well. So first it's 4 divided by 4, that gives you your denominator. And then 44 divided by 4, and that gives you your numerator. So give me the final unit rate of 44 points to 1 quarter. And then you would write points and quarter. Excellent. So it is important that you label. Thank you. I'll give you your XP. It is important that you label your numbers because 11 what? Points or 11 quarters? 11 points. So it's important that we know what you're talking about here. Now, when you're doing this, I know I said step by step, but when you're doing this on paper, homework, math, test, quiz, whatever it may be, just write that out and do the math right here. We know we're going to divide this by 4 because we need it to be 1, which means you're going to do the top by 4 as well, and that's going to be 11. Then put your label of points and quarters. So that is a unit rate. Before you volunteer for the next one, I want you to take a look at it. 12 meters in 28 seconds. So I'm going to give you a hint before you volunteer for this one. It will not be an even unit rate. This is going to be the one that comes out as a non-unit rate, which means you're going to have to write it a little bit differently at the end. Does anybody want to attempt it for 300 XP? That is 12. 12 meters in 28 seconds. No brave souls. Okay, I'll do it. I'll take it. Abby, come on. You can do it. So step 1, whether it's a unit rate or not a unit rate, is to write it as a, as a fraction. So first number on top, second number bottom, 12 over 28. Now, if we divided the denominator by 28 to get 1, we wouldn't be able to do that to the top, right? You can't divide 12 by 28, but you can simplify. You could find the GFC. Now remember, when you're simplifying, you could start with 2 and get a fraction, and then look at it and go, oh, I could simplify again. You can keep going. You don't have to do the greatest common factor. If you do the greatest common factor, you only have to divide 1 time. So what could you divide 12 and 28 by, Abby? You could do 2, but you could also do 4. So let's try 4. So divide the top and the bottom by 4, and we're going to get a simplified fraction. All right, so we have simplified to 3/7. Does anything go into 3 and anything go into 7? So we are in simplest form, right? We are in simplest form, which means you can't go any further. So you can write this 2 different ways. Write one way out for me, Abby. Three meters to 7 seconds. Excellent. Do you know how to write the other way? Are you brave? You want to try it? What is the fraction? Start with the fraction. What is the simplest form of the fraction? 3/7. All right, now we get the hard part is, what's the label that goes with 3/7? It's going to be the top. 3/7. Wait, we have to label what 3/7 is. 3/7 what? 3/7 of a meter or 3/7 of a second? Which one? Okay, remember when you have it this way as a fraction, 12 over 28, which one do you want to become 1? 12 or 28? You want the bottom to be 1, so 28 goes with, so we would say 1 second, which means this fraction goes with the other label, which is, what's the other label? So it's 3/7 meters to 1 second. There we go. Perfect. Whatever your bottom number is the one that's supposed to be a 1. So 28 goes with seconds. It's supposed to be 1 second, so we're going to say 1 second. The fraction is always your first label, 3/7 meters, the first label. Okay? All right. You are done with notes.